Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osterberg501 and today I want to go over all of the unique class mechanics coming for all of the different classes in Diablo 4. Now every single class in Diablo 4 is going to get its own unique class specific mechanic that will pretty significantly change up how that class is played compared to other classes, or add in some different customization that's specific to that class. And we actually know some information for most of the classes for these unique systems. And I don't think a lot of people actually know that this is going to be something in Diablo 4, because unless you've kept up with a lot of the quarterly updates, you probably haven't even heard of this system. And I think that's a pretty big disservice to the system, because I think it is genuinely really interesting and is going to add a lot of variety and uniqueness to playing different classes. Now we know the current unique class mechanic for 4 out of the 5 classes, so that brings us to the Druid, which seems to be the only class that hasn't had its unique mechanic specifically outlined in any information from the developers. But there is a few things that this could potentially be. First being, the Druids do have a more unique feature in that they have a chance to deal a crushing blow with any of their earth skills, which reduces the enemy life by a flat percentage of their total, and this has a reduced effect against bosses and other players. And even though this is a mechanic unique to Druids, I don't think this is the big unique feature for this class that we're going over in this video for the other classes, because this is more of a passive power effect, not a different way to play the class or customize your playstyle. And the second thing it could potentially be is the Druid's shapeshifting. Now Druids get to shapeshift into a bunch of different animals, such as a werebear or a werewolf, and different skills will actually utilize different forms. So if you press a specific skill, it would take you into a different form seamlessly, and then there will most likely be tons of different unique effects you can get on armor or through the skill trees that will probably allow you to stay in forms longer or buff up specific forms to try to make builds around specific ones. But unless there's something tied into the shapeshifting system, this also doesn't seem like it would be its big unique feature, because this just seems like it would be part of the Druid's class in general. Just like using lightning or frost skills would be something for the Sorceress, shapeshifting would be something for the Druid. And that brings us to the Barbarian, which has the unique class feature called Arsenal. Now this allows the Barbarians to carry 4 different weapons on them equipped at all times, and allows them to switch between these 4 different weapons. This is 2 two-handed weapons and 2 one-handed weapons at all times, but that could be something that is changed. And also you're able to apply a specific weapon to every single one of your abilities, because also adding on top of this system, most if not all of the Barbarian skills are going to require a specific type of weapon to be used. So maybe an ability is going to require dual-wielded weapons, or maybe one's going to require a two-handed weapon, or even down to maybe one's going to require a two-handed mace. And using a specific skill will actually automatically switch to that weapon seamlessly. So going through your rotation as a Barbarian, you will be constantly switching weapons back and forth while using your different skills. And this will give you a pretty substantial amount of customization, being able to choose the different weapon loadouts you're using and setting those specific weapons to specific skills. Now with this system, it also seems that all of the affixes from all 4 of your weapons are always applied while in combat, but that is definitely something that could be changed. So we're going to have to wait and see to how that plays out. But this potentially means that Barbarians are going to just have more options in terms of different combinations and synergies, because they have these more weapons with more affixes to add into their builds. And next up, we have the unique class mechanic for the Sorcerer, which is called Enchantment. Now, just like all of the other classes in Diablo 4, the Sorcerer has 6 active skill slots, which are the abilities you use out in combat. But the enchantment system adds 3 more slots that you're able to put active skills into. But when putting these active skills into enchantment slots, it turns them into passive effects, and you can no longer use those abilities as active skills. So for instance, if you put Meteor into one of the enchantment slots, you now can't use Meteor as an active skill, but it being in an enchantment slot will periodically cast meteors on random nearby foes. And every single skill for the Sorcerer is going to have some effect when slotted into the enchantment system. And it's hinted at that not all the effects are just going to be random procs like this Meteor, but that there's going to be more synergies and more playstyle altering effects when slotting some specific skills into this system. So this enchantment system will play a pretty significant role in your overall build creation for the Sorcerer, and I'm very curious to see what type of synergies this has with different set pieces in the game, or different unique items, or different legendary items. And I think this unique mechanic is going to add a lot of different build variety and potential with the Sorcerer class. And next up, we have the unique class mechanic for the Rogue called Talent Specializations. Now this allows you to choose between these 3 different specializations called Combo Points, Exploit Weakness, and Shadow Realms. And each of these specializations is unlocked by completing a Rogue specific quest line with one of 3 Rogue groups out in the world. And these 3 specializations add significantly different mechanics to the Rogue class. So Combo Points cause your basic attacks to add combo points, and your spender abilities use those combo points to gain additional effects. Now, something to note is these combo points aren't on a specific enemy, it's adding combo points to yourself as essentially an additional resource. So you won't have to worry about applying combo points to a specific target, which is something you would have in, say, a Rogue in World of Warcraft. Now, we don't know a lot of these additional effects, but this essentially adds another resource that you have to keep track of that will empower your spender abilities and make them much stronger, and probably add some more significant effects to them. Now, going with the Shadow Realm specialization, you get a new ability called Shadow Realm, and this causes you to become immune for 1 second and pull targeted enemies into a Shadow Realm with you for 5 seconds. Now, in the Shadow Realm, you're stealth, you're unstoppable, and you deal 50% more damage. And essentially how this was being explained by the developers is this will allow you to specifically target more dangerous enemies, bring them into a Shadow Realm with you, where you can deal with those specific enemies by themselves for the entirety of the time you're in the Shadow Realm. And I'm not sure exactly how this would work on elite enemies or mini bosses or bosses, but I could very much see this allowing you to pull in, say, a pack of elites, deal with those elites, and then come out and deal with all of the other enemies afterwards. So it's just allowing you to split up enemies and deal with certain ones by themselves. And then for the final specialization, we have Exploit Weakness. And this allows you to exploit the weakness of certain enemy attacks. And all attacks against exploited enemies become guaranteed critical hits and deal 60% increased damage. And this was actually shown in gameplay that you will actually see a difference in that enemy's health. So kind of the red bar around their health is glowing a lot more, which means you're able to exploit weakness on that enemy, making your next attack against them deal a lot more damage. And this was also mentioned as a specialization that is going to take a bit more skill to use, because it's also not as player driven. So you have to have quick reactions to constantly be targeting the specific enemies that have this effect on them. And I'm still really curious on how this will interact in PvP, or how it's going to interact against bosses, because because if you can get this to consistently proc against a boss, this seems like it would easily be the best specialization for going against bosses. And depending on how often you could get it to proc in PvP against another player, it could also potentially be ridiculously strong for bursting down other players in PvP. An honorable mention for the rogue is that they also have another unique mechanic called the imbue system, which allows you to modify the damage type of certain skills, changing them between cold, poison, or shadow, adding the effects of those different elements. And this is essentially kind of lacing your weapons with these different effects. So lacing your weapon with poison or some cursed oils for shadow damage to apply these additional effects from your attacks. So for instance, you could apply cold to your attacks, slowing down enemies and building up a freeze on those different enemies. And this is just kind of another secondary system that's something a bit unique for the rogues. And then finally, we have the unique class mechanic for the Necromancer called the Book of the Dead. Now you get this Book of the Dead right off the start of playing a Necromancer, and this also adds an extra skill to your bar called Raise Skeleton, which is going to allow you to summon up some skeletons from the very start of the game. Now in the Book of the Dead, you have skeletal warriors, skeletal mages, and golems. And then going into any one of those specific summon types, you have multiple layers of customization. So for instance, for skeletal warriors, you have 3 different specializations of different warriors you can summon. You could have your skeletal warriors be skirmishers, defenders, or reapers. So skirmishers are a more standard warrior that have increased damage but reduced health. Defenders have bonus health, and then reapers have slower attacks and deal AoE in front of them. And then on top of those different specializations, you have unique upgrades you get to choose for those different summons. Now we don't actually know any of the different upgrades for these different summons, but this essentially gives you multiple layers of customization because you get to choose the different specializations of those summons, and then you get to upgrade them with different options. So you could go into skeletal warriors, you could then choose say skirmishers, and then you have upgrades to choose for those skirmishers. So this gives you quite a lot of customization if you're trying to play a Necromancer as a summoner build. But there's even more on top of that, because also in the customization of these different summons, there is also a sacrifice section. So essentially what this does is allow you to choose a different buff that you would get from sacrificing that specific summon. And these are a personal and permanent buff. So say if you want to play a Necromancer that only has a few summons or has no summons, you can choose a sacrifice buff that's the best for whatever build you're doing, sacrifice that specific summon, and that's going to give you a permanent customizable buff, allowing much more options in the different builds you can create for a Necromancer. So that is pretty much all the information we have on all of the unique class mechanics for all of the different classes in Diablo 4. And keep in mind, this is just the one unique class mechanic for all the different classes. You also have all your different skills you get to choose from. You also have your biggest skill trees they're creating for the game. You also have all of your different armor pieces, all of your different stats to choose from. You also get points to put into different stats as you're leveling up. Then you have the big Paragon boards once you get into the end game that you can slot in these different massive skill boards. So there is a lot more customization beyond this, but these unique class mechanics are genuinely going to make the different classes feel very unique and different from each other, which I think is going to add a lot more replayability into the game, because as stated by the developers, the idea behind the system is to add something into every class that makes other people go, that's bullshit, I want to play that class because it has that unique feature. So I'm a pretty big fan of this type of design, and I think how they're going about it is pretty interesting so far. But that's pretty much all I want to go over. So subscribe if you want to see more Diablo 4 or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about these unique class features, and thanks for watching.